My name is Guy. Today I want to talk about We're Here because it is an entertaining TV show with a purpose. In each episode, world-famous drag queens Shangela, Eureka O'Hara, and Bob the Drag Queen visit a small town in Red America. They meet local queer people and partner with them to organize a drag show for the community. We're Here highlights the reality that queer people live in conservative and religious parts of America, a reality that someone like me does not really know about. I grew up in Trois-Rivières, a liberal city in Quebec, Canada, so when the Queens visited Jackson, Mississippi, I was exposed to completely new realities. I could also relate to some experiences portrayed in this episode. The episode starts with the Queens visiting a blues bar where they are seemingly welcomed with open arms. One of the blues musicians says, "Blues don't discriminate." It is presented as a warm welcome to Jackson. But quickly the show gives us a broader perspective of the city and the state. They talk about Mississippi's history of racism and oppression. Bob says, even if we're in Jackson, the biggest town in Mississippi, it's still Mississippi. This helps the viewer better understand the challenges that marginalized people may experience in Jackson. Religion looms large in this episode. It's almost a character of its own. We see multiple churches, and we even meet Mark, our first local participant, at a church. It's fitting because Mark talks about his religious upbringing and the impact it has on his relationship with his family. He says he does not know if his parents are okay with him being gay because they never talk about it. So he feels the need to create a chosen family, but it's a challenge in Jackson. Local participants like Mark really make this show great because they open up about their struggles and realities to help us better understand how the queer experience can vary drastically. The show presents Mark as a sweet guy, openly gay and looking for community. Mark is paired with Shangela, who visits him to have a conversation. Mark feels that white gay men are more tolerated in Jackson than black gay men. He feels the pressure to be straight passing. Race is another important component of this episode. Mark says Jackson is very divided along racial lines, and that's also true for the queer community. And he works with local organizations to bridge that gap. These conversations are always an interesting part of the show because here you have two queer people seemingly living on different planets. On the one hand, the queens make a living and found stardom through their queerness, whereas the participants experience challenges with their identities. This dynamic is extremely evident with the Bronski, a gay man who is paired with Bob the Drag Queen. Right away, you can tell he is surprised at how Bob is presenting. You could even say he feels uncomfortable. The Bronski has a lot of walls. When Bob asks how he identifies, he basically says it's not his business. He's not comfortable saying he's gay or using the word queer to define himself. He says people in his circle don't use these terms in Jackson. Instead, he refers to himself as MSM, men who sleep with men, a term Bob never heard before. But Bob is not judgmental. Instead, he tries to understand what the root cause is. So the Bronski talks of his religious upbringing. When his family learned he was gay, they got him an exorcism. His parents and the church tried everything to get rid of his gayness. He was even threatened with a gun by a family member. And he hasn't seen his parents since he was 16. Then, Bob and the Bronski talk about the black experience as queer people in the South. And this is particularly interesting to me because, being a white French Canadian, I'm not exposed to that reality. They talk about family and the pressure to fit in. Luckily, the Bronski is close to his cousins who are open-minded and loving, and he's in a healthy relationship with his fiancée. The Bronski then says he used to be afraid of drag queens because they're over the top. He says he likes simple and classy, so the fact that he's willing to participate in this HBO docuseries is brave in his circumstances. We're Here does not only show queer people though. The show also highlights allies. I grew up in a small town, so I understand how important allies are. I was openly gay and had a ton of straight, bro-y type of friends. They were not aware of the challenges of being gay, how could they? But they were supportive in good faith and open to learning. And this is the storyline that the show is presenting with Chris. He loves motorcycles, guns, weed, and women. He presents as super masculine, and he's confident with his own sexuality. He also admits that he was not open-minded when he was younger, and he had to learn to embrace people's differences. That is super important to hear, because if we want the world to change, we need to allow people like Chris to change and celebrate that newfound openness. He's paired with Eureka. On the surface, these two seemingly have nothing in common, but they both have loud personalities, and they soon bond over the loss of their mothers. At times, their conversation revolves around gender constructs. Eureka says she would love for him to embrace femininity for his drag performance. He's reluctant at first, but he ultimately embraces the experience. This shows the pressure that cisgender men feel with regards to their masculinity. After the meeting, they hug and Chris says, "You're so dope." This is also important to see on TV. Like all episodes of We're Here, the Jackson episode focuses on 3 storylines that will converge at the drag show. We have Mark, a community leader trying to bridge the gap within the LGBTQ+ community of Jackson. Dobronsky, a gay man trying to come to terms with rejection over his sexuality in a hyper-religious and conservative city. And we have Chris, a straight, cisgender ally who's on a journey to gain awareness about the queer community. The show also ventures deeper into the local LGBTQ+ community. Mark brings Shangela to a local bar. We learn that the queer community in Jackson is divided along racial lines to the point where some bars are predominantly black, whereas other LGBTQ+ bars are predominantly white. The owner of the bar says it wasn't always like that. Mark says his black friends often ask why he hangs out with white people. They don't care about you, they say. But Mark wants to bridge the gap. He likes both circles of friends and sees no reason why they wouldn't get along. So he brings up the race issue in a queer leaders meeting. We see them having an open conversation about race relations. The white man feels like he's trying to bridge the gap, but is met with pushback. They conclude that queerness sees no color. Oh my god, side note. I know I talked about this before, but I'm always triggered when I see Americans using styrofoam. I haven't seen styrofoam glasses in decades here, and I'm so glad because styrofoam is slow degrading, almost impossible to recycle, and is made of chemicals that contribute to polluting our water sources. It really should be banned, but until then, we can take individual actions to replace styrofoam with more sustainable alternatives. Anyways, back to the show. Bob meets with Dobronsky's fiancée, who's also a drag queen. Bob explains how drag changed his life. It made him proud of his queerness and his blackness, and he hopes Dobronsky will experience the same pride. Eureka and Chris also meet. Chris is a rapper of sorts, so Eureka wants to incorporate that into their drag number. He improvises some lyrics and they're vibing. In their excitement, Chris calls Eureka bro, so she tells him she'd prefer he doesn't use that term with her. He apologizes and thanks her for pointing that out. This exchange was important to see on TV because Chris was not malicious. He was not aware of the impact a word like bro could have on a transgender woman like Eureka. And he learns from being exposed to her reality because he's open-minded. Eureka says Chris is an ally for opening his mind to the queer reality. Then, the queens and their glam squad meet with their participants to plan the drag show. And it's a process for everyone in every episode. The Jackson episode is no different. The tucking, the makeup, the costumes, it's a lot. And it leads to interesting conversations. Someone on Bob's glam squad says he too used to be afraid of drag queens because he was taught they were horrible people. So Dabrowski can relate to that. Later, Bob and Dabrowski spend an evening with his cousins. Unlike his parents, his cousins seem supportive and open-minded, although they don't seem to know much about the queer community, and it leads to a funny scene where Dabrowski announces he'll do some drag, and they ask if he means drag racing, like the cars. So he's like, no, like wearing a wig and a dress. He wasn't sure how they would react, but his cousins are like, it's cool bro, we got you. Dabrowski then opens up about his childhood trauma and he cries. His cousins are supportive, and that's important to see for so many queer people. Preparations for the drag show continues. Shangela and Mark are killing it, he's a natural. Eureka helps Chris loosen up, they're feeling themselves. Bob and Dabrowski decide they'll tap into his trauma and current emotions for his performance. The next day, the queens visit a local event and invite people to the show. But when Bob returns to the venue, he is met by religious protesters. They tell Bob, "You're an abomination." And Bob's like, "Me? You don't even know me." They call him a pervert and accuse him of grooming little boys. This type of rhetoric is growing stronger. I recently received a deluge of similar comments on my YouTube. By broadcasting this encounter, HBO helps illustrate how difficult it is for people in Jackson to come out and live their truth. But the drag show goes ahead anyway, and the community answers. The place is packed. And by the way, these performances are worth your time. They turn up the party, baby, and it's so great to see everyone having fun and killing it after they opened up about their trauma and journey. After their performance, each participant gets a chance to address the crowd. Chris says the queer community is amazing and comes from a place of love. Mark talks about showing unity and how beautiful Jackson is with so much diversity. And after his incredible performance, Dabrowski tells the crowd about his struggle from childhood to now. He says, "I allowed others to make me invisible. I won't be invisible anymore." And Bob's fit is so iconic, by the way, oh my god. We're Here seems to be a transformative experience for the participants. Emotions run high behind the scenes in every episode. The Jackson episode is just one example of how We're Here successfully raises awareness about the queer experience in America. It's well produced, entertaining, and it serves a purpose. If you haven't seen We're Here yet, go for it. And if you like this video, you might also like this one. My name is Guy, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.